Garmin released the Forerunner 935 on March 29th of 2017. 763 days later, or about 2 years, Garmin released the Forerunner 945. Then 1,129 days later, or about 3 years, Garmin released the Forerunner 955. I will say, to be fair, Garmin also released the Forerunner 945 LT about 2 years after the 945. But today, Garmin is announcing the Forerunner 265 and Forerunner 965, and it's just been 273 days or 39 weeks since announcing the previous versions of these devices. Now, I don't actually have access to either of these watches yet, but I'll get a hold of both of them, do some swimming, biking, and running with each of them, and give you my full reviews as I always do. I just wanted to make a quick video here commenting on the timing of all of this, but if you are curious about these two new watches, the quick details on the updates are that both the Forerunner 200 and 900 series of watches now have this new vibrant AMOLED touchscreen display. We've actually never had a touchscreen on that 200 series of devices, so that's a first here with this 265. And of course, the 265 also has onboard music. It can do everything that the old 255 could do, so that's full triathlon tracking, HRV or heart rate variability monitoring, this morning report that you guys know I like, wrist-based optical heart rate monitor, pulse ox, which is Garmin's term for blood oxygen saturation monitoring, body battery, energy monitoring, advanced sleep monitoring, sleep score, stress tracking, menstrual cycle tracking, and pregnancy tracking. But this 265 and the new 965 for that matter don't have Garmin's new ECG functionality, where you can perform an electrocardiogram scan of your heart to look at cardiovascular issues like atrial fibrillation or AFib, and it's a new feature for the Garmin Venue. So I am super surprised that Garmin left it out of both of these new Forerunner watches. Not sure why that's the case, but turning our attention to the Garmin Forerunner 965, we see that yes, it's an ultra bright AMOLED touchscreen display, but it's also significantly bigger in size. This is a 1.4-inch AMOLED touchscreen display as opposed to the 1.3-inch of the 955, and I actually love how they've added a titanium bezel around the edge here, but they've also somehow managed to shrink that inner black bezel. But because of that smaller, tighter bezel, the bigger screen doesn't add all that much width to the casing size of this watch. The 965 is listed as 47 millimeters in width, and just for reference, the 955 here was about 46.5 millimeters in width. But real quickly, back to the 265, which actually does come in two different size options. The 265 comes in a 46 millimeter option, which is the same as the old one here, and then they also have a 265S, which is 42 millimeters. And for what it's worth, I have very, very small wrists. I still prefer the larger size, at least when I was comparing the similar options of the 255. And this is the 46 millimeter version of the 255 that I have on my wrist here. And of course, you know, both size and the brightness of that AMOLED screen are gonna affect battery life. With the smaller version, the 42 millimeter sized Forerunner 265S, you can get up to 24 hours of battery life in GPS mode, and up to 15 days in smartwatch mode. And of course, that's with the display set to raise to wake. And I haven't tested this yet or anything like that, but based on my experience with the Garmin Epix, which has a similarly bright AMOLED display, I'm guessing if you put your display in an always on mode, you're gonna end up with something along the lines of 4 to 6 days of continual usage in smartwatch mode before needing a charge. You'll get a little bit less battery life from the larger 46 millimeter sized Forerunner 265 with that larger AMOLED display, and you can expect about 20 hours of battery life in GPS mode and up to 13 days in smartwatch mode. Again, just guessing that that'll translate to about 4 or 5 days if you set the display to always on mode. And actually, what I find interesting is that the battery life on the 965 is pretty impressive. Even with this larger AMOLED display, you can expect up to 31 hours of battery life in GPS mode and up to 23 days in smartwatch mode. Again, if I'm kind of doing my rough math based on the always on display mode, I would expect this watch to last probably along the lines of a week. It'll be interesting to compare it to the Garmin Epix, but it kind of looks like this watch might be Garmin's best battery life option when comparing all of their AMOLED display offerings. And I also think it's interesting that this is their largest AMOLED display at that 1.4-inch size here. Now, both watches still have the same standard 5-button layout, But the start button actually looks a little bit bigger on both of these. And the 265 has run engraved into it. Now running is my favorite sport, but I still think I would prefer to have the more subtle Garmin triangle engraving like the 965 has here. But the new 265 will set you back $450, and the 965 will cost you $600 at launch here. And it does sound like the 265 will be available today, and the 965 won't be available until later in March. And I'm guessing a lot of you guys are looking at your brand new 255 or 955 just like me, and wondering why has Garmin released a fully fledged new version of this Forerunner series of watches so quickly after the 255 and 955 launch. I'm right there with you. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to see Garmin move more quickly, maybe get on a reliable yearly update cycle. We can almost always expect a new Apple Watch in either September or October of every single year. But I did reach out to Garmin and I asked that specific question, why the short turnaround time between the 255 and the 955 and the newer 265, 965 today. They didn't have anything specific or official to respond with. And of course, they don't owe me any sort of response. They can launch new products anytime they want to. Maybe tomorrow they'll launch the 975. I have no idea. I just always like to be able to recommend buying options to you guys. And my guess is that when they released the Garmin Epics with this bright AMOLED screen, maybe they were really surprised at how well it sold, and I'm just guessing that Garmin was eager to move that particular technology to other series of watches that they have. It's still interesting. It's interesting that it's gotten a full number bump like this. I kind of think that it could have been like a 955X or something like that. Maybe do a full number or a version bump when there's more features available and they kind of warrant that whole update process. When Garmin actually released the 945 LTE, that was their explanation. They kind of explained it that it didn't deserve a full version bump, even though it was completely different hardware than the previous 945. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Does this update feel a bit too minor to jump up to calling it a 265 or a 965? And obviously Garmin isn't consulting us, but I'm still curious to hear you guys' opinion. And just like you, I'm still learning about all of this stuff as it develops today. So feel free to meet me down in the comment section and we can discuss all this stuff as we try to figure it out. And I'll try to provide a lot more details when I have had both of these watches on my wrists for a bit. But until then, make sure you're getting out there, swimming, biking, running, rinsing, and repeating it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.